Hello and welcome to the Monday, April 4th, 2011 City Council Informational Meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. All council members are accounted for. We'll start off with our City Council staff report with Deborah Aowen, City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations. Deborah?
Thank you and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. As requested, we're going to run through the selection of the applicant for the Northwest District that will happen tonight at the 7 o'clock meeting at the very end of that meeting. But we'll just walk through that process now, if you will. There's a couple of pieces of paper at your desk. Well, there's more than that, but there's one that has red writing, one that has purple, and hopefully you can find those, and we'll just walk through this process together. The council chair actually presides during this portion of the meeting, and so once you finish up with item 38, Mayor Huth will turn the gavel over to the council chair, Jameson, who will then take the presiding officer's seat. And then he'll ask the assistant city clerk to read the title, and she will. It will be a resolution appointing the new council member from the Northwest District. And then to kind of explain the process to the public, Council Chair Jameson will make some opening remarks and kind of walk through so the public understands that this is the end of a process of selection of this candidate. There's been the forum, there's been a working session, both open and public meetings where the public could give input along with emails and questions. So what will take place then is the council chair, or the presiding officer, if you will then state nominations are in order for the council member from the Northwest District. And generally, those are made one at a time. You could have one council member can say, I nominate, applicant A or B. But if it's the will of the council and there's no objections, a person of the council, a member of the council, can simply state or nominate all of those, applicants A, B, C, D, all at one time, if there is no objection from the council members. And then the council chair will state each of those nominations again, and then call for any further nominations, and if there are none, nominations will be closed. And at that time, then the assistant city clerk will be asked to call the roll. And they will. And so you will vote by declaring the name of the candidate. It won't be a yes or no vote. You'll declare the last name of the candidate when your name is called. Now, because there's a requirement of 5 votes, and that's in city charter, there may be several votes that need to take place. In 2006, when council member Litz was appointed, there were 3 votes that were taken, with a recess in between the second and the third vote. So it may happen quickly, it may take some time. You also have the option to recess at some point in time, as you wish, during this process. At the end of that, when you do have at least a majority of 4 or perhaps even 5, then you will need to vote on the resolution itself, which you'll adopt, make a motion, and second, as you normally do by custom. There'll be a roll call vote by the presiding officer, and then once that is done, then Councilmember Jameson will announce that item 39 is passed with the number of yeses and no votes. And then that gavel will turn back over to Mayor Huther, who will chair the remainder of the meeting. At that time, just so the public knows as well, the mayor will resume the chair, and he'll ask the assistant city clerk to read item 40, which is actually the swearing in of the new council member. He will then make some opening remarks, introduce Honorable Larry E. Long, the Second Judicial Circuit Court Judge, and we'll invite the new council member, along with the Judge Long, into the well, and family members who may be present to hold the Bible for the oath of office. Judge Larry Long will then administer the oath of office, and then there will be some signatures required by the mayor, the judge, and the new council member. Once that is finished, the mayor will then offer some closing remarks and take his seat, and then call the motion to adjourn. And that's it. Simple as pie.
Anybody have any questions on that procedure? So just to be crystal clear, we're going to have a nomination by one of the council members to nominate all 4 applicants. We'll need a second to get them on the table, and then we'll do the roll call vote, and you'll have to say the name of the person you want, and we'll tally that up, and the high vote getter wins. But we got to get to 5. We got to get to 5. So if we wind up with 4-3, 4, and any other 3-3-1, whatever, we'll have to do it till we get to 5. And then after we get to 5, if it doesn't wind up with 7-0, we want to pass and introduce another resolution to get a majority, a 7-0 vote in support of that final applicant. Yes, go ahead.
I just was going to say, with this process, we're using Robert's rules, which are the nominations from the floor. In this process, you don't need a second for your nomination. It's a little bit different than if you had a committee who was making that nomination moving forward, like a subcommittee. So you can simply make the nominations, and then the council, the presiding officer, will restate those names, and then you move forward with that roll call vote.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Am I to understand you, though, Councilor Chair Jameson, that you want all 4 nominated in one? Is that your preference?
I think that's how we had
Okay.
intended to do it.
Okay.
Am I right? I think I'm right. Okay, as a gesture of goodwill. And anything else? Questions on that? All right, we have a Land Use Committee report. Councilor Chair Erpenbach, are you ready for a little report?
Yeah,
please?
we just had a couple of really kind of critical reports, but things have been kind of going on for a long time. We first of all heard from the Planning and Building Services folks about the rental housing registration. They're in the process of rewriting the ordinance so that we won't necessarily require landowners or landlords to register every 3 years. They're suggesting that we go to kind of a continuous registration unless there is a change in ownership, change in address, that kind of thing. Staff is really close to that final draft, and we are then going to hear an update again in April. So the committee will work with that, and then our goal is to move whatever that final draft is, move it on to council. The second thing that we heard report about was transit routes. And we did ask as a committee for staff to start figuring out how to fund and how to accomplish a study of the routes and look at that with the idea of looking at that grid system. And so we've moved staff forward on that. This one will take longer, obviously, but we will have an update at the April meeting as well. Yes, a grid system, Councilor Jameson. Thank you for the sign language. I appreciate it. So we'll have those 2 updates in April, and then looking forward to May, we'll be doing some more with community development and starting to look at how our relationships with other agencies here in town. So off we go.
Any questions of Councilor Erpenbach? Well, one interesting note that we should all be aware of for sure is that we can review those committee meetings now on the web, on siouxfalls.org, right? Which was a great tool for us as councilors to go back, and if we weren't able to attend the meeting, we can go back and watch it and at our leisure. And
Well, and if I might, did it web stream live, that first one? So it's web streaming live. Is it also on Channel 16 live then?
Yes, actually, it's not rebroadcast on Channel 16, but it is web streamed and it is shown live on the night of the committee meeting.
Good, thank you.
all right, we do have a fiscal committee meeting coming next, and Councilor Brown, chair of that committee. Do you have any preview you'd like to share?
We have 2 issues to cover today. We're going to look at draft ordinance of council approving contracts. So I would encourage even non-fiscal committee members of the council to please stay if you can to hear that discussion, because we're going to be going through that pretty much line by line. And then also we'll have an update on the budget analyst position. No votes today, information only.
Any questions for Councilor Brown? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on, and I think to City Council open discussion. Anybody have any items they'd like to cover? I'll share one item. I know that we had an email sent today from Tracy Turbach to change the April 18th date for which we assumed, I think, was the final report for the Event Center update, to move that to some other date, but not given. But Tracy is going to give us an update on the 18th. So we don't know yet, unless the mayor or somebody would like to share with us. Maybe I have it wrong, but I had thought that the 18th was going to be the final report given to the council as a update, but I may have learned that it was the week of the 18th. But either way, I know I've shared the 18th with others about it being the final date, and I know there's some media and other people interested in that. Mark, could you update at the council on when the final update on the Event Center proposal would come?
Certainly. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. The intention is as we work toward the end of the study, that we would identify that time frame, the week of the 18th, also identify the appropriate venue, and so that's where we never actually, in our last update, didn't have those details worked through and are working on them, and so that's why we just identified the week of the 18th as opposed to the 18th.
And as you said, a venue, so maybe you'll select a location that's different and a format that's different, but you'll present it anyway sometime to the public and invite the council to attend. Is that?
Absolutely. And I think just this is obviously a very beautiful chamber, and we do a lot of presentations here, but it does have the presenter with their back to the audience, and so I think there's many good venues in the city. And so those are some of the details that we're looking at. The Orpheum is certainly a candidate. And as we get those tied down, we'll certainly share those.
Just if I could real quick, though, we're all scheduled to be here on the 18th.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of that week may not be in our calendar because it's our week. There just could be a challenge if you only have a couple of counselors who can attend when you're doing your final presentation. It may not be as productive as you would hope. Please work with us as best you can in finding a date that fits for everyone. Hopefully this council at least.
Absolutely, we certainly will.
There. Councilor Rolfing.
Yeah, I happen to be one of those that has a conflict that week, and I had planned on watching it live, and so I would encourage you that if you are not going to have it here, have it someplace where it can be on the screen, so to speak, so I can watch it.
Absolutely, will do.
Okay. Councilor Aguilar.
So with that final presentation, that will be the end of the informational updates? Yes, no?
Oh, no. This is obviously, this is a long process, and we certainly intend to continue to do at least monthly updates. It's just as we started to look at April and the timing of either the 11th or the 18th, as it got so close to the final reports. Tomorrow the experts will be here for the council forum. Best use of their time as they come in and out of Sioux Falls, and also the best time to actually have some really good information from the studies. And so that was our intent.
Just a reminder that we also do have an informational on the 25th, that following Monday, if that would work.
Okay.
When do you plan on, excuse me?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Okay.
Sorry. Entenmann.
When will you, any idea, Mark, when you're going to have the date locked in for us for sure?
Well, we're tracking with Wednesday or Thursday of that week. And just honestly, as these consultants, they are pressing to get their work done. And now we'll logistically start to work out those dates. I'll make sure that I reach out to you to make sure I can get the majority of the city council there so it can be a good and productive meeting.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Mark. Still under city council open discussion. Is there anything else? Anybody? Are we all set for tomorrow night? Is everybody going to be there? Okay. Looks like yes. And I think we'll even have a new council member to join us. Hopefully they, whoever that person is, will be able to attend as well and put them right under the spotlight and right into the fire. It'll be good. Okay, anything else? Seeing none, we'll move on with our presentations. We're going to start off with our railroad relocation project update by Mark Cotter. Mark, welcome again.
Thank you again, City Council. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. I'm going to introduce our project manager, Josh Peterson. Josh is the project manager. He's guided us through several recent meetings with the federal agencies. Has some brief update for you today, and also will attempt to answer your questions. We've also recently given 2 other meetings with some public pieces to it as well. So the progress is beginning on the road relocation. I think you'll see that with Josh, and one of his final slides is his schedule. Thanks, Josh.
Good afternoon. Joshua Peterson with Engineering Division of Public Works, Principal Engineer, and as Mark said, I'm also the project manager for the railroad relocation project. Just going to give you a brief update on what we've accomplished over the past couple months and also the schedule going forward. I do not have some slides. That's for the next presentation, so just wanted to go through.
Very good.
Go through this briefly. So. First of all, past couple months, it's been a pretty busy couple months for us. We've made some good progress on the project. One of the key things we did was updating our project management plan. We got that revised for the goals and the project going forward. It is a pretty in-depth document. I got a copy of it here. And what the project management plan does, it outlines the roles and responsibilities of all the key team members on the project, sets forth a communication plan of how the different members interact, and also the timeline for the project going forward for the environmental assessment. Another key piece of that project management plan is the consultant steering committee. That's the committee of key stakeholder members in the project that get together on a regular basis and review the progress of our consultant, provide input and direction going forward. And like I said, we've reassembled that committee and got those key team members into a room and kicked things off this year. Along with the city, we also have as part of that steering committee, we have the South Dakota Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, members of BNSF Railway, and also Ellison Eastern Railway, since they are a primary member of that uses the railroad switching yard. Along with those public agencies, we've also asked 2 members from the general public to sit in on those committee meetings to provide some outside input on the project. One of those members is Jeff Eckhoff with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation. He has some history with railroads and working with some of the other communities in this corner of the state, so has some good background. And also Gene McGowan from McGowan Capital, a downtown business owner that has some good experience, and both of them have agreed to sit on the committee and provide that outside input for us. So appreciate their commitment to the project. We have met with the consultant steering committee this last month and sat down with our consultant and looked at the proposed sites and alternatives that we're looking at as part of the environmental assessment. And we kicked off the discussion looking at the design challenges for each one of those sites, the conflicts that we'd have to work around, things like that, and also looking at operationally the challenges as far as maintaining Burlington Northern's operations in town. So we had a very good meeting there, gave the consultant some good direction moving forward, looking at those preliminary designs. Along with that meeting, we've also, as Mark indicated, I've given a couple presentations to different groups within Sioux Falls that have asked to get an update on the project. One is the Downtown Development Committee, and also the Build It Downtown group has asked for a presentation, and I gave them a little update on a project as well. So that's kind of a summary of the past 2 months. Kind of give you a little update going forward, what we plan on accomplishing here, some of the goals for the next 3 months. We've given the consultant some direction now on the sites we're looking at, so they're going to proceed evaluating the different alternatives and looking at those engineering and operational challenges to do some preliminary design to see what's going to work at those sites, and come back with us with some recommendations on sites that will work and maybe sites that won't work. At the end of 3 months, when they come back with those sites, the ones that are feasible, we'll then take those into the environmental evaluation process to see environmentally if those sites will work or if there are major impacts. Just finally, a little bit on the schedule. As I said, working on a feasibility this 3 months, and then we'll go into the environmental side of things. We are still on schedule from the 20-month schedule that I presented to you in November. The next update I have planned to the City Council is scheduled for July 5th, and that is on the informational calendar already. Our goal on that 20-month schedule is to have a draft of the environmental assessment by the end of the year, and then late next year have the final EA completed. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Any questions for Josh? Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, who else is on that steering committee, Josh?
It's the two citizen members, and then, as I said, the city staff is on there. The State Department of Transportation, there's a representative from their environmental office. Federal Highway Administration, there's a member from their environmental group as well. Burlington Northern, out of their corporate office in Fort Worth, and also out of their regional office in Minneapolis. And then Ellison Eastern, their local staff here in town.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7 people?
7 or 8.
Oh, then your guys.
Yes,
How many
and a consultant as well brings their staff to that. And it's those are the regular members on those on that steering committee. We will bring in different members depending on what discussion topics there are. You know, if we need to bring in some members from some of the state agencies like the DENR, things like that, we'll bring them in as needed. But we'll have a core group that we want involved throughout the entire process.
And how often do you meet?
We now have it scheduled quarterly, about every 3 months. We have it. We have the availability to meet more frequently if needed, but that's what we have planned right now.
Okay. And Kendra, is this one of the projects that's on your push list? Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Joshua, thank you. Help me understand from a practical standpoint, what are the biggest holdups here? Is it finding the location, or are the environmentals going to take the longest?
It's a little bit of both. The environmental is the key purpose of the environmental assessment, is make sure we are not harming the environment. But one of the key factors in that process is that we have to find a feasible site that will work for the new switch yard, and that is a key component to this, to make sure that whatever we choose is going to fit Burlington Northern's operations. So it's a two-step process, and right now we're on that first step of looking at that feasibility.
Thank you.
Councilor Entenmann.
Joshua, in the past, we've seen some preliminary suggestions on how the routing might possibly go through Sioux Falls and those kinds of things. As you look at sites, a couple of different sites, and assess whether or not they meet the criteria. And from an environmental standpoint, will the design possibly change of the spur, the routing of the spur, and those kinds of things?
There's a possibility that we might have to modify what we've shown in the past to fit the conditions that are in the field to make that work operationally for Burlington Northern. You know, the two key things we're looking at is a switchyard site that's going to fit the criteria for Burlington Northern, and then what can we do downtown to maintain their connection through town and minimize the impacts to, you know, all the historic things in downtown, such as Falls Park. So we may have to modify things as we go, but the general locations that have been shown in the past are still what we're looking at.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Josh, if I could, was there a date that you had given when we had expected all this to be done as far as the lines moved? And was it 2014 or something?
The goal for the completion of construction is the end of 2014.
Okay, and I just see that there's, from what I remember, there was like 3 major questions that had to be answered. And the first one is, who owns that land? Who does Eastern Ellis have the first right of refusal after Burlington Northern leaves? Has that been settled?
They do have a first right of refusal on portions of the property in downtown. And after the steering committee meeting a couple weeks ago, I met individually with Burlington Northern, and that was some of the discussion we had was on the property and starting to lay out the framework for that transfer of property and the removal of any of encumbrances from other entities. So we haven't finalized that work yet, but as part of the project, that is one of the requirements the city has, is that any property in the downtown area that will be freed up by the removal of railroad will be transferred to the city unencumbered.
And you have that worked out. I mean, Eastern Ellis is on board. They're willing. Everybody's.
As I said, we haven't finalized the details of that, but Ellis and Eastern we have had discussions with them. They are open to working out a resolution with us, and Burlington Northern understands what those requirements are.
And then the other couple, next one would be if the 36 is it 36 million that's left from the earmark from the federal government.
Yes.
What's going to happen? Isn't there a memorandum of understanding if that 36 million doesn't cover this project? Who else is going to pay for this? Is that the city? And has that agreement been worked out?
That is something that we have not really discussed. What would happen above that 36 million if that would not cover the cost of the project? Until we have a footprint of what we're looking at as far as alternatives and can put together a good cost estimate, it's tough to speculate on those types of costs and who would participate in those. But it is something that will be finalized and ironed out in an agreement prior to any construction starting.
Right. Well, I see that's got to be the biggest question hanging over the heads of everybody is if it's over 36 million, who's going to pay? Mm-hmm. And if there's an interest from the city to really get these lines moved, perhaps they need to participate in some way and they need to be able to step right up. But if 36 isn't even close and this is turning into a $100 million project, surely somebody would have a good estimate that 36 is either going to cover it or isn't close or it's somewhat close. But I just think we have to enter into that agreement and have full participation before we go any further, just from my perspective. But
yeah, and by the end of the environmental assessment process, we should have all of those questions answered and have an agreement with Burlington Northern on how that's going to work out. The alternatives we're looking at now, some are potentially much more expensive than others. So and without having a preferred alternative to know what we're going to actually build out there, it really affects the cost of the project. So we need to answer some of those questions and see which alternatives rise to the top so that we can have better information before we finalize a negotiation like that with BNSF.
Councilor Intiman.
One more question, too, just to kind of piggyback off of what Councilor Jameson said. The soonest it could be, if the stars all align and the sun shines and the grass turns green, we're looking at 2014, correct?
Yes, that's an aggressive schedule for the removal of the tracks, but it is achievable as long as everything falls into place for us.
But potentially there's a number of landmines that exist out there for us.
It's a very complex project, and we got to take it one step at a time. And there's possibilities that it might not work out as planned, but we do feel it is an achievable schedule.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. Is it Josh or Joshua?
Joshua.
Joshua. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have another presentation. It's the rate model update for water reclamation mid-year rate increase, which we never like. But Mark Cotter.
All right, thank you again. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. Tonight, you'll hear from Trent Lubers, and then our rate modeling team, which is Steve Burrian, which many of you know very well, as we've done this process over the last 4 years on an incremental basis. I was asked a question earlier this morning by Councilor Brown, why are we doing a mid-year rate increase when in the past we've always done brought these forward as one package, and then had all the rate modelers in the room, had a lengthy presentation, so you had a sense of what was happening with all the respective utilities as opposed to this one. And the key for this is just as we've provided updates since the collapse of last August, and understanding with the assessment of the system and then identifying the projects under a compliance order with the South Dakota DNR, we've obviously, with your assistance, accelerated a substantial amount of sewer work for 2011, much of which is already under construction, and you'll start to see a lot of action happen here in the month of April. Now with the next tier, which next week we'd like to bring forward, that next large project, which really goes from the Tuthill lift station and then heads due west over a mile in length over to Duluth Avenue. That really starts to provide some relief to that south side. But from our standpoint, we look at it from two ways. We got to make sure that we have the revenue that's coming into the fund so we can cash flow these projects and ultimately service the debt. We're also very conscious of our ratepayers, and we do have options. I will tell you that we do have options, but the options are either a smoother approach or a more drastic approach in 12 and 13. And so what we would present to you tonight is our preferred recommendation. We think it's better for the fund and it's better for our ratepayers, but it does require a mid-year rate adjustment of an additional 5% and then subsequent rate increases for 12 and 13, of which we've talked about in the past. We just want to make sure that we can financially move forward with these projects, strengthen our system, but also have the least impact on our ratepayers. So with that, yes.
Councilor Brown, go ahead.
Mark, before we get into that, and maybe stop me if the presentation is going to include this, but I'd also like to see the purpose of us increasing the rates over the last several years has been to build a reserve. So I'd like to know where that is at, as well as what will happen as a result of this proposed rate increase.
Certainly, and you will see that our rate, those reserve targets are met through our recommendation, and you'll see that from Steve.
Thank you.
Okay. To start with, the first few slides is for those that, just to recap, either as council members or members of the public, to recap the system and some of the recent capital improvements that have been made and or planned, and then Trent will turn it over to Steve Burrian. Trent?
Thanks, Mark. Trent Lubers with the Office of Public Works. I'm going to kind of give you a general overview of the Water Reclamation Division, the capital projects that we've completed in the past, and where we'd like to go in the future. Thanks, Brian. The best way to look at the wastewater treatment system is the whole system. It's really made up of two pieces. There's the collection system, which is self-explanatory. It's an 800-mile system with pipes as small as 6 inches. A more typical size for us is 8 inches. That's the collector that's out in your street that takes the waste from your home. And it increases in size all the way up to a 66-inch pipe. And that is the last pipe, or the last gravity pipe, that goes to the Brandon Road lift station. Out on Rice Street, we call that the Brandon Road lift station. That's the final lift or push to the treatment facility. The system is quite large. Again, I said it's 800 miles. There are 28 lift stations. We serve 46,000 customers, in excess of 46,000 customers. The system is cleaned and maintained on a regular basis. We get into all the lines and clean them every 3 years. The lift stations are cleaned every 2 years. We also have a SCADA system, a computer system that we monitor the collection system 24/7. It's always watched. There's 24-hour standby. There's people that are ready to respond to situations in the system as they occur. The next part is the wastewater treatment facility. It's a large facility. For any of you who have not been out there, I would love to take you through on a tour. It's a 21 million gallon a day facility. It's been through several enhancements. It was built in the 1980s. It's been through an enhancement, 4 enhancements. We're going to do another one this year. It's a filter rehabilitation project. It's our last line of defense in the treatment system or in the treatment plant before we discharge back to the Big Sioux River. We intend to turn out a better product once this project is done, and also will increase capacity of the facility. We have gone through, I think, 6.7 billion gallons of water treated last year. That's up significantly. The year before, our normal average daily flow was about 5.4 billion gallons. So the rains of last year, the significant flows of last year certainly created some issues for us. The treatment plant is monitored and operated by 2 operators 24/7. There's somebody there. There's 2 people there every day, and we have laboratory staff there for 8 hours every day. Last year, the treatment facility, all those 6.7 billion gallons that made it to the treatment facility made it through all the stages of treatment, and we discharged it to the river in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. Some recent capital expenditures. With your support, we move forward segments 5 and 6 of Central Main. We've talked a lot about the Central Main. We have a responsibility not just to meet a growth, but also to reinvest in our existing infrastructure to make sure that it is in good condition to convey wastewater for the future. And we are intending to do that. Again, with your support, we've moved Central Main 5 and 6 up to 2011. Also at the treatment facility, we've gone through several upgrades. One of note is the cogeneration down at the bottom. It's a $1.9 million project. What that does is it takes a waste product, the biogas that's generated from a portion of treatment out at the plant, and it burns it in this engine, and we generate electricity. We generate about 22 to 25% of our electrical demand out on the treatment site. And we also reclaim the heat from that combustion process, and it's used in part of the treatment process. Some future capital expenditures. I'll save the top one. Mark talked about that a little bit. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But again, most of the projects that you see on here are related to investing in our existing infrastructure and rehabilitating that, with the exception of the 4th one on the list, which is the East Side Sanitary Future Treatment Plant. That's a small number right now in comparison to what the overall project is going to cost, but this is a land acquisition for us to get the necessary land to construct the facility, and then preliminary engineering. Also, you see some projects there, trickling filter, HVAC, and roof. That's investment in our existing treatment plant. And then the top one is Sioux River South. Sioux River South is essentially the southern end of the city that takes wastewater from the southwest and the south portion of town. It's a large trunk sewer. If you look at how we talked about the mains, the 8-inch lines that are in your street, that's the small portion, and then it goes to a trunk line. There are minor and major trunks, and then there are interceptor sewers, which is the central main, and that 66-inch. The Sioux River South is a trunk line. It's a major trunk line for us, and it takes that southern portion of the city. This is one of the lines that we identified in the assessment process. This is a reinforced concrete pipe that was showing advanced signs of corrosion. And we split this project up into 3 phases, and it was a Tier 2 level of project. So there's a Phase 3 is something that's going to happen this year. We have a capital project in place with the savings that we had on the Central Main project. We were able to take care of some of the projects that we had scheduled later. So generally in the area of the mall, along Meadows on the River, in that area, the Sioux River South runs along Skunk Creek in the river. And we will be doing a lining project there. We've identified through the flow metering project, another project that you helped support and accelerate forward, we identified a large source of infiltration. So this lining project will help us address that source of infiltration, to take that excess water out of the system, to take more flow off the pipe. The next phase, Greg gets us to the next slide. This is the next phase of Sioux River South. This is actually Phase 1. We're doing Phase 3 as a lining project this year, and this is Phase 1. Several weeks ago, we brought forward a measure for you to authorize us to enter into the SRF loan process, and that is to take care of this project. All the way to the right of the screen, you'll see where the Tudd Hill lift station is. The existing pipe size is a 42-inch reinforced concrete pipe. What we'd like to do is increase the capacity of the pipe by enlarging it to a 54-inch. Clearly, the pipe has advanced signs of corrosion, so it's also a rehabilitation process for structurally deficient pipe. If you remember the February presentation, we talked about a rating system 1 through 5 to rate pipes both for structural and for infiltration. And this section of pipe rated as a 5 as far as being structurally deficient. And then the last thing that we're trying to do with this project is to provide some relief. If you notice on the left side of the graph, there's a line that goes up along Duluth and up to Minnesota Avenue. And what that project is going to do is it's going to divert some flow south into that Sioux River South system. That flow normally would go east, and it would go through the Pam Road area. The hope is we'll take some peak flow off with this relief line, put it into the Sioux River South system, and we won't send that excess flow through the Pam Road area, and we'll take some relief and pressure off of that line. That will also stop us from having to upsize that line, and there are some engineering challenges to upsize that line based on how deep it is and what we could do. And there was a lining project that was done in that line in the not too distant past, and that work all would be for naught if we were to take that line out of service and put in a larger line. The next part of the presentation would be Steve Burian. He's going to talk about the proposed rate increases. Mark had already mentioned that we're looking at a 5% mid-year and then an 8% for 2012. Thank you.
Council Chair Jamison, members of the council, my name is Steve Burian. I'm with AE2S. I've been doing your rate consulting for your water and your water reclamation utilities. And as Trent indicated, I'm here today to support city staff and consultant recommendation for a mid-year increase to your water reclamation residential rates and other rates of 5%, and then a residential rate increase on Jan 1 of 2012 of 8%. If we step back on this presentation, the first thing we always like to do is to provide a little insight on where we're starting from for the year. This is a reconciliation between where we thought we'd be for the operating revenue, other income, operating expense, capital outlay, and unrestricted cash balance, as well as, and that's in green, as well as the actual performance at the end of 2010. And you can see all of them are quite close except for a couple. On the operating revenue side, there was just a slight dip in actual performance over projected, and that had to do with the decreased amount of water sales within the community. On the operating income side, although it's not intuitive in the graph, you actually pulled in more money from your cost recovery strategies than you budgeted, but we had to do a cash or accrual to cash accounting adjustment, and that's where we elected to put that. And so you have some accounts receivable at the end of the year that weren't reflected as cash, and so it appears like we were upside down, although we had more revenue than we thought. Similarly, on the operating expense side, Trent did a very good job of watching the operating costs for the water reclamation utility. Most of those were down in comparison to budget, with the exception of insurance costs, where some of the sewer backup claims in August did cause some excess dollars. But you do have a unique funding program that you use through the SRF program, where you'll get some non-point source funding through a creative strategy, and the interest rate buy-down that they use for that ends up being an accounting adjustment, and it's put into operating expense. And so much like that previous accounting adjustment and other income, This should look the way you'd want it to see, where operating expenses are slightly lower than the budget, but because of that accounting adjustment, it ends up being slightly higher. On the capital outlay side, this isn't as attractive as it appears. It mostly has to do with delays in capital projects, and most of those are showed up as encumbered dollars as part of the 2012 budget and modeling process. But because of those delays, you did have a pretty significant dip in cash. With that, then, all of those changes, you can see your unrestricted cash balance within 2010 was quite a bit higher than what was projected. Once again, with most of that difference being spoken for through other capital projects. You're looking at the model moving forward. We always have to try to have a crystal ball and project growth, both in terms of revenue and in terms of operation and maintenance expense. We found on the number of meters or the number of housing units constructed that that's relatively easy to project, and we've long used a number of around 1% a year. Maybe when I first started, when the growth was a little bit higher, we were closer to 2%. But we're projecting a 1% annual growth in the number of meters within Sioux Falls. On the water sales side, it's a lot more fickle. If it's a wet year, we tend to have less water sales. If it's a dry year, we tend to have quite a bit more. Quite honestly, in the last few years, we've seen a downtrend in water sales repeatedly. And so as a result, for 2012, we're a little bit gun-shy, and we're projecting a zero growth increase again for water sales. However, we don't think the wet period can happen forever, and with the growth you've had in meters, it stands to reason that to start going up. So in 2013, we're projecting a slight bump in the model to 0.5%, and then for 2014 and after, we're going to project a similar water use growth to what we have for the number of meters. On the O&M escalation side, obviously we're in a period right now of very low inflation, and so that's built into the actuals for 10 and the budgets for 11 and 12. We keep hearing rumors, though, of inflation jumping up in the future, and so on inflation in general, we've looked at a 4 to 5% increase in the out years. For personnel services, where you do see some attrition on the high end and some new entry levels on the lower end, we kept that at 4%. For fuel, based on past history, you use 5%. And then the two biggest costs, or two of the bigger costs, and two of the ones that are harder to project, electricity and chemicals. If we do start to see any type of inflation within the utility, these are always the hardest hit. And so we budgeted more aggressively for those two particular areas of the budget. In the past, you've always liked to see on your operation and maintenance budget where the different dollars are going. This is just a quick pie chart that reflects that. You can see your total O&M budget for 2012 will be around $8.5 to $8.6 million, and roughly half of that has to do with people. The other half then is split between a range of things from professional services to supplies, repair and maintenance, utilities, and then a miscellaneous grab bag of other costs within the utility. We've also tried to do a diligent job of tracking our debt over time. The City of Sioux Falls is in a healthy position in terms of debt for the water reclamation utility. Mark and Trent alluded to, however, that we have some pretty significant projects that you're pushing through the utility, both in terms of the Central Main and the Sioux South side. As a result, you can see we're going to project a jump in debt in 11, and then we'll see kind of a gradual decline. And then out in 17, when it's time to plan for that second satellite plant or wastewater plant on the east side sanitary sewer, you can see another jump is projected in the out years in terms of debt tracking, followed by a pretty aggressive pay down again after that. One of the things we always try to do, and I think Councilman Brown alluded to this, is we try to make sure that we have healthy reserves within the utility. The first one we always try to maintain is an operating reserve. This is the reserve that's meant to handle annual swings in cash flow throughout the year. This can have to do with how water sales work throughout the year versus when the expenses happen. It can also relate to some type of disaster where all of a sudden you don't have revenue for a period of time and you need to have a place to draw while you're taking care of that disaster. Across the United States, the norm is between 60 days and 180 days operating reserve, or somewhere is upwards to 50%. In your case, we've always elected to use 3 months or 90 days, which equates to, for the current model, roughly $2 million in operating reserve as our target. On the same side, whenever you have as much assets as you do, there's bound to be some unforeseen rehabilitation replacement that comes up from time to time. As a result, we've also recommended a capital reserve. There's different ways of valuing this. In your case, we've elected to use 15% of the average capital improvements plan for the City of Sioux Falls Water Reclamation Facility, and that results in a capital reserve of approximately $2.8 million as a target. And maybe the only thing I'd correct is that we really haven't been trying to build these targets, Councilman Brown. We've probably been trying to maintain them. The City of Sioux Falls had quite a bit of cash within their water reclamation facility or utility budget, and they had a lot of demands on that. And so we've really been settling a little bit and using some of that cash while not wanting to use so much as to not use this as a floor within the cash balance. The next graphic is the one that I always jokingly term as the Cotter graphic. We were trying to struggle for a way to figure out how to best represent this to you over the years, and Mark sketched some things out on a piece of paper based on several graphics that we've come up with. The neat side of that is if you like it, you can give him credit for it. I guess the other side of it, if you don't like it, you can also blame him. It is quite complicated. It has time across the bottom axis, and then it has two different vertical or y-axes. I guess engineers have to talk that way. On the left y-axis, you see dollars, and that has to do with all of the lines except the percentage line. And the percentage increase is the one over on the right axis. And so what we have is we have a line with boxes in it. That's the lower line. That's our target for the operating reserve. The upper line with boxes in it, the reddish one, is our operating reserve and our capital reserve added together. And then the green line reflects our ability, or is the actual projected operating reserve balance. So it's indicating whether we're able to make that or not. And you can see we fund that one as a first priority. And then the second red box is the total, the red bar is the total balance of the capital reserve. And then those together are compared to the second line. And any time, obviously, where we're above that line, the summation of those two reserves is exceeding target. If we dip below, which we get close in 2014 in this model, that shows that we're getting close to the sum of those two models. What we're showing here is that we're showing the old increase in 10 of 16% that you've previously implemented. We're showing the 3% increase in January 1st of 11, plus our recommendation this afternoon of the supplemental 5% increase in 2011 for a total of 8. And then in order to maintain all of our revenue requirements and the associated revenues that we think we're going to bring in, as well as maintain healthy operating and capital reserves, we're projecting in the out years a series of 8% increases through 14, an increase then in 7% in 15, down to more inflationary increases after that of 4% and 3% in the out years. And the only one that, again, to draw your attention is a specific recommendation other than the 5% on July 1st of this year would be the 2012 increase of 8%. All of the rest of those will be remodeled and brought forward to you in future years. In terms of looking at the bottom line, in terms of where the model's at, we have on here the 2000 projected expenses or budgets in different categories of O&M, debt, and rate-funded capital, or the capital that you fund through cash. We have what's in the budget right now for 2012, and you can see that the O&M increase is essentially flat, just a very, very minor increase in O&M. But given the large projects that you're pushing through utility, there's a relatively significant jump in debt service annually within this utility and a relatively significant jump within rate-funded capital for a total increase in from 11 to 12 of about $3.6 million. You'll notice that the new revenue that we propose to generate in 12 will only generate about $2.2 million, and so we are using a little bit of cash reserve in order to smooth out the rate increases moving forward rather than having an enormously large increase in 2012. If we then look at the details, you remember today we're talking just revenue adequacy. Do we have enough revenue to offset our revenue requirements? And if we don't, what kind of increases do we need? When we originally did the study for you, we also did a cost of service assessment analysis. The cost of service analysis is meant to make sure that the user classes are paying reflective to their cost of service within the utility. And so we always make sure that we adjust rates accordingly. For 2011 supplemental, we elected to use across-the-board increase for residential, both on the meter and flow side, commercial, domestic, industrial, and high-strength industrial flow and meter. So we're just projecting or recommending a 5% across-the-board increase as an attempt to bring in additional dollars for the utility. And you can see what the 2011 approved rate was originally in the year and what that rate will be with the supplemental adjustment. If we turn the page then and look at some other categories within your utility, namely industrial, and then all of the consecutive discharges that you have. For the industrial, because the revenue the improvements that we're putting in are primarily flow-driven, we did not feel it was appropriate to increase the strength charges as part of the midterm increase, and so we're recommending 0 increases for strength at this time. And then because we have contracts with all of the other outside entities, and those contracts do not allow for mid-year increases, we're also recommending 0% increases for those outside discharges as well. And you can see the resulting 2011 approved and then no change for the mid-year difference. Moving on then to the 2008 recommendation, or 2012 recommendation of 8% residential, you'll see that these percentages are not the same for all of the different user classes. This has to do with that cost of service function that we talked about previously. For residential and commercial, we are recommending an 8% increase for both flow and meter for both of those user classes, as well as for the domestic industrial, which are the smaller industries across the community. For the high-strength industries that have higher organic loading or solids loading coming into the community, based on the cost of service, we are recommending a 16% increase for both meter and flow in 2012. Switching to the same page that I showed you for 2011, if we move on to strength for industrial, we're recommending the same 16% increase for all of the 4 strength categories that you have: organics, solids, nitrogen, and grease. And then based on the cost of service for the remaining entities, we're recommending a 2% increase for Prairie Meadows and Renner, a 3% increase for Harrisburg, and then a 0% increase for Brandon, only because your contract only allows them to be increased every other year. So we've been having a higher increase one year and then no increase the other year based on your contract with them. Maybe in a preemptive mode in terms of why aren't these percentages as high as some of the others, particularly when those consecutive discharges didn't have the mid-year increase in 11. When you look at the cost of service analysis, Prairie Meadows, Renner, and Brandon are all located relatively close to your wastewater treatment plant. And so when we did the cost of service, they're using a very, very small or no part of your wastewater collection system. So when costs were spread to these different consecutive dischargers, they weren't spread aggressively on the collection side, only on the treatment side, and so that reflects in the way that the cost of service analysis was done for them. On Harrisburg, you went a totally different route with them, where you used a multiplier to establish their rates, and so they're paying some multiplier over and above what they'd be paying if they were inside the community. They do use a greater part of the collection system as it ebbs and flows through the community, but as a result of those multipliers allow you to be closer to the cost of service for those consecutive discharges as well. This graph just shows quickly where we've been and where we think we're headed moving forward. You can see that this utility got a little bit behind in terms of its increases. I think that was one of the reasons we were brought in to do the rate study. We recommended a series of very aggressive residential rate increases that were implemented from 7 through 10. Originally, we were thinking we'd get away with just an inflationary increase in January 1 of 2011 until we had the major flooding problem and sewer implications that hit as a result. So the total for 2011 will be 8% with the supplemental 5, and then we're looking at 8% increases in 12 and 13 to adjust for some of the debt service associated with the improvements that are moving forward. This is the standard graphic that we've been using over the years to show how you fit into the region. This is right out of our 2011 regional rate survey for mechanical wastewater systems. When I say mechanical, this does not include lagoon systems. So for those smaller communities, they may have different rate structures, but this is the larger communities that have mechanical systems. And you can see that your increase through June of 2011 would have put you in the lower quartile of the rates across the region. With the extra 5% that we're proposing for July 1 of 2011, you'll really only move forward on residential rates past one community in the region. If you raise your rates the additional 8% in 2012 and nobody else raises their rates, I don't have the projections yet for the rest of the communities, you can see that you would bump up somewhere to the 40th percentile. What's commonly happened, though, is as we get the data in 2012 from the other communities, they're also forced to raise their rates, and we haven't seen that kind of jump in the past. The other thing I always like to draw your attention to is the reason this bar chart is shown as two colors is the dark color is the minimum, the amount of money you raise through a minimum charge with no water related to it, and the green is the volume charge. And you can see there's different philosophies across the region, with Watertown and Alexandria, Fargo, Litchfield looking at a minimum only. So they have a constant charge for all residents across the community, regardless how much water they use and how much wastewater they discharge. In your case, you have a small minimum to deal with some revenue stability, and after that you really charge on a usage basis, which is probably the fairest for all the citizens across the community. Hitting the home stretch here, I just have a couple more slides to present to you, and then I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. This is the bottom line for those residential customers within the City of Sioux Falls. If you move forward with the 5% mid-year increase that we're recommending, the average water consumption in town is about 5,000 gallons a month, or 100 cubic feet. In January, that would have been $20.65. In July, you'd add $1.06, and you'd be up to $21.71. Similarly, if we move forward to 12 with that same information, an 8% increase would result in a residential increase of about $1.71, with a resulting 2012 monthly charge of $23.42. With that, that's the information that I have to present this afternoon. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Councilor Aguilar.
Yes, as far as our contract with Brandon, the length of that contract, and is it allowed, are there any rate increases allowed in the contract?
Yes, you can. The contract, I do not know the specific term. I can check on that. I did hear this afternoon that all of your contracts are up in 2014. So that is, as part of your regionalization study that you're looking at, you're trying to bring all of those other together under one common umbrella. But the answer to the second part of your question is that every other year you can raise their rates. And so we've been more aggressive every other year in raising their rates. But for whatever reason, when that contract was signed, it stays the same one year. We have the ability to change it the next, and that alternates every other year.
So is there a limitation on the amount that it can be increased?
No, I think, well, there's not a defined number. I think there's a limitation in all of them that it can't exceed your residential flow rate within the community, so it has to be at parity with what you're charging your residents. Given that they have their own collection system and they're discharging to you, normal cost of service analysis would never drive them up to that range, and so I think there's a ceiling in most of them, but that ceiling doesn't get reached.
Thank you.
Councilor Intamin.
Just one question. So it's really safe to say that one of the main reasons for a little bit higher increase this year is because of the issues that we had last year with the system, and the fact that we're accelerating some of our maintenance on that system. Is that not correct?
I think that's absolutely true.
So then if we didn't have those issues, I mean, it's hindsight, and it doesn't really make a bit of difference, but we probably wouldn't have been looking at this specific need then, correct?
I think most of the projects that we're doing in an accelerated fashion were envisioned. It's just that you, as part of an asset management strategy, you never quite know when the life of an asset is going to be reached, and I think we had unfortunately a real true test last year in terms of some of the flooding and things, and so I think we would have been able to have smaller increases, accomplish the same things over a longer time frame. We're now having to crunch things into a much shorter duration.
So with the projections that you do have, you see 8% rate increases over the next few years, but then after that you drop down to a maintenance of about a 3%.
Right, back to inflation.
So that's
again.
probably, okay.
Yep.
Councilor Olfen.
Thank you. I don't know if it's a personal matter or an interest matter. One of the first slides you showed was that loop going north on Duluth from the west, from Trent, you were on that one, from going west out of Tuthill, the Tuthill West Station. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is that going to be water that's going to drain above ground?
No.
That'll
it'll
be
an
all underground?
It'll be an underground pipe.
Okay, so it won't do anything to the soccer fields at Yankton Trail, potentially?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, just wondering. I mean, I'm
Is that
looking
fair,
at.
Mark?
That's very much response on that, but in later years, when we go on our 18 months bridge, there may be some construction on that.
by disruption, you mean, yeah, come on up to the mic.
Could you come up and clarify the question and then your answer from the beginning, if you could, so everybody gets up to speed?
Mark Perry, Principal Engineer with the Engineering Department. With the Phase 1 project, there will be probably little disruption to the soccer field area other than the entrance of it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see the lines going across there. We'll definitely need to do some open cut construction there. And we have another entrance into that park that can be utilized, so I'm very confident we can work around that issue. In the Phase 2 and 3 portions, actually the Phase 2 portion is further down, and right now we're proposing for it to run through that soccer field area and along the asphalt drive through along that parallels the interstate. Currently, that pipe runs along the Big Sioux River. So there's some different options that we're looking at there so that we don't disrupt those soccer fields. There are some lines that we do need to run across the soccer fields if we put that pipe parallel with the interstate. Those are small pipes at a much smaller depth, and we can situate that so that we have the least amount of disruption to those fields as possible.
I guess I was more concerned about potential for, if that was going to be kind of a ditch or whatever kind of thing you had going in there, that there would be, could be major flooding if a big rain came and that kind of thing, but I'm not hearing that either.
No.
No, that's all underground and, yeah, okay. Yeah, there's room. You need to do a new drive there anyway.
Okay.
Councilor Anderson?
Another question on the,
on another note, that we do have parks involved with all of the sequencing of this.
Sure.
And they're aware of everything that we're doing here.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson?
okay, another question on the south interceptor there. Right now, in the presentation, you stated that that Duluth connection would help alleviate some of the issues in the Pam Road area.
That's correct. Trent alluded to that. And if we take the flow right now at 41st and Duluth, it splits in two different directions. Part of it goes to the east on 41st Street, and part of it goes to the south down Duluth. And our proposed, right now, our proposed plan is to take all of it to the south. So then at that point, there is zero flow going down 41st Street, which helps out that line on 41st Street so we don't have to upsize it. And also in our preliminary modeling, we've determined that it has the potential to help those people out on Pam Road that have been impacted in the past with sewer backups, and hopefully eliminate that.
Okay.
And another thing that Trent pointed out was that pipe in the 80s was lined, and there was a lot of money spent on that pipe from Minnesota all the way over to Lincoln High School and around up to Cherry Rock Park. It was all lined. So we're looking at it as, from a perspective of, it would be a waste of money to do any work on that pipe that's already been rehabilitated when we can take that flow down to another pipe that's being extended and upsized. So that's kind of the general plan for that.
So there is no need to try any other connections to that line from the Pam Road area or that Lincoln High School area then with this Duluth connection?
We already do have some connections, some different diversions there on Cliff Avenue, actually. Some of the flow can overflow from the Lincoln High School area if it gets to be too much in that area and overflow to the Tuthill lift station. So.
Okay. Another question, if possible. You talked a little bit about the new treatment facility. I don't know who to target that at. Could you give us a little more information on that treatment facility? Sure. We're looking at land allocation right now. Have we found any areas to?
Generally, the area that we're looking at, because the lift station 240, we call it. It's the new lift station we built as part of the East Side Sanitary Sewer System. It's if you take a logical extension of 57th Street all the way to the Big Sioux River East, that's where that pump station is. In that general area is what we're looking at. What we've been working with our consultant on determining is what size that lift station has to be. Can we build it on the west side of the river or the east side of the river? And so we're looking possibly at a parcel of land on the east side of the river. That makes the most sense from a cost of operation, cost of construction, those types of issues. So it would be in that general vicinity. The facility would be built in stages. It would be built or it would be designed for an ultimate build out, but we would only build what we would need in the early stages. So in that 4 to 6 million gallon a day range would be the initial construction, but it would be designed, and some of the initial construction would take place for that ultimate build out.
And this facility would be a collaborative effort with the regional partners that we have, or is this going to be something that Sioux Falls is going to pay for?
Certainly would be an attractive regional asset, depending on which communities would want to come to it. It would be looked at as part of the regional system, and so costs would be allocated that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Intiman.
Trent, just one more question on that. What is actually going to trigger the need for it? I know that's the plan, but we all know that construction is down a little bit. What is going to actually trigger the need?
Okay, the East Side Sanitary Sewer Lift Station has the ability to push 3.5 million gallons a day back to the existing treatment facility. So when we reach that, when construction picks up and we start to see that level of growth, and maybe we see 1.5 to 1 3/4 million gallons a day on average regularly, that's when we'll start triggering the pre-design. We'll have the land acquired hopefully by then. We'll start the pre-design, and we'll start the design process and then the construction phasing process based on if that rate of growth is sustainable and we continue to see it.
Okay. Councilor Brown.
Brad, could you go back to that historic slide that shows the percentage increases over the year? Steve had mentioned that prior to that, there were not increases. In fact, it was 10 years the city went without increases. And I think it demonstrates, at least no matter what we do here, at least we're having this conversation, because that compounded, and that's why we're here today dealing with these kind of increases still, because it was ignored for 10 years. Not even inflationary increases. So the other thing, just for the public's sake, I want to remind them that the sewer system is run as a business, so you're paying for what you use. It's not supported by tax dollars, so it's the most fair way to deal with paying for what you use. So, Steve, as always, your presentation is very thorough. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Last thing. In the beginning of the presentation, Mark, you said something about other options as far as raising rates. We never really got into those. We talked about the rate options that you're proposing, but what was the other options that we were looking at?
Go to the other one. Go to the one I have. I guess I maybe should have added this graphic at the back, so I apologize. But if you can take this graphic and imagine if we only increase the rates by...
Cartograph and your imagination altogether.
Which one is that one? I guess you don't have to imagine in this high-tech world. This is the graphic. If we did no supplemental increase for this year, we would then we'd have only a 3% increase in 11, which you've already approved. But in order to maintain our revenue over revenue requirements and also maintain our reserve balances, you see we need to have back to a double-digit increase in 12 and 13. We drop back to 8 and 14, and then we drop down to inflationary increases in the out years. And this was the driving force. I think we didn't know exactly what you'd want, but from a staff consultant standpoint, we're proud that we had dipped below that double-digit increase, and with the surprise from the flooding last year, we were trying to get a strategy that would prevent having to do that again. And it shows how important it is with compounded values. The earlier you can get in to do that, you can see the impact that that has on the model over the long term.
Thank you.
So I think what I heard is that whenever, or as soon as Mark Cotter came on board, is that when we started raising rates?
No, I think it actually did predate him, in all fairness, Council Chair Jameson.
I'm just trying to clarify that for the media and the public. I'm sorry, I digress. The couple questions about how the water bill is determined for the residents. More so, that's what I'm worried about is the residents. How is that amount set? Meaning, I really like the idea of charging as small as possible fee. If you could go back to the communities that all have, you have all the communities listed around us that have a rate, meaning that having the fixed amount, the wastewater fixed charge being as low as possible, and so the more you use, the more you pay. How do we keep that fixed rate as low as possible? And because I think everybody's fair and good with the idea that the more you use, the more you should pay. But that fixed rate, just to be plugged in, to hooked up, how do we keep that as low as possible?
Well, certainly, Council Chair Jameson, I think that it really becomes a policy decision. You can see from the way that the different communities charge across the region that it goes from all the ends of spectrum, from St. Cloud on the top there that charges all volumetric with no minimum, to a series of them that charge 100% minimum, and then most of the utilities have some amount of that. And in your case, when we started, you had a relatively low meter charge, and so as a result, we've tried to maintain that relatively low meter charge. The amount of money that you elect to recover from that meter charge, there is no hard and fast rule on that. And so, should you want to charge less than that, the downside is you're not going to have quite as much revenue stability. The upside, you'd charge only for the amounts that flow that comes in. And so I don't know, that's probably where the arts comes into this a little bit, is there's no steadfast way of how one needs to assign that. I do know that in the absence of any meter charge, you run the risk of just, if somebody has a unit but they're not using it, or they have other reasons for it, you don't collect any revenue on that. And so what we always try to do as a minimum is try to cover at least the administrative charges of the utility through the meter charge, kind of the overhead. If we can cover the overhead, the next thing we'll look at is some percentage of the debt service, because that's a fixed cost if the user wants to have more fixed charge than volumetric. And the last thing that we'd obviously try to put into a volumetric charge is a variable cost, like that's related to flow. And some utilities still will elect to do that. But in your case, you're very close to the bottom. I think we do a sanity check annually just to see how your minimum compares to the amount of overhead that you have within the utility. But other than that, it really is a judgment call or a policy decision.
I see that the one that least showed up on your chart here is based completely on the amount of water that you use, and then the highest one is based on just a clear fixed charge. So maybe there's an insight there that if we really wanted to get by on the lowest possible rate for citizens, would be to go to switch our formula or format. But you're saying that the revenue would be volatile.
Well, a little bit more volatile, because it would all ebb and flow with the amount of water that was used within the community. Because we really don't meter the wastewater, right? When
Right.
Trent talked about how much wastewater that was coming through, a lot of that's inflow and infiltration coming in from either the ground or from the manholes and things. None of that runs through a cash register. The only cash register we have is the water meter itself, and so you're a slave to how much water is used in the community each year as it relates to water reclamation. But if you charge a minimum, obviously you're going to get that amount of money no matter how much you charge, and so the more your meter charges, the more revenue stability you have within the utility. You're far enough off of that that it's obviously not a huge driving force for how we're setting rates.
And then if you could just tell us on when our bill is set. Seems like if I remember right, you use several months of the year to quantify somebody's normal annual use, and then you set that up as the rate. Is that the normal? Could you share that process with us so people know when to conserve water and not get billed?
Right now, as a residential customer, we look at your usage from November through February. We average it, and that becomes your wastewater usage for the rest of the year. And that's when we also expect that you're not watering a garden, flowers, or a lawn. And so it keeps the water usage component separate from your sewer bill. So right now, if you are going to conserve, November through February is when we take a snapshot at your water usage in your homes, average that, and that becomes your usage that you're billed on for the rest of the calendar year as a residential customer. The other respective rates are by month, like the customers and the more the industrial users.
So
those are not treated like that.
If you're going to be out of town, November through February would be the time.
That's appropriate.
Go on. Councilor Rolfing.
Snowbirds are going to like that. The question I have is, I'm looking at the chart that's up here. We seem to be the largest city on that list of cities. Is there a reason for that? Why isn't Omaha or Des Moines or some of those, Lincoln, Nebraska, some of our cities that we're generally associated with on there?
Councilor Rolfing, some of this is a victim of our particular firm is centered in North Dakota and then does work in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, and Wyoming, and so we do a 5-state regional rate survey, and we do it pro bono each year, so this information is readily available to us. In the past, to address that concern, and I don't have it with me tonight, but I could have it for the second reading, we have done cross-sections of Omaha and Des Moines, Iowa, and some of those that are maybe more reflective of your utility as a sanity check. We haven't seen measurably different results, but we certainly could do that again.
It wouldn't be bad. And then let me get this straight, North Dakota?
I apologize, that is where I live, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We had less snow on the north end when I came down, more snow in the middle, and less snow again on the end.
Okay,
so
good.
There's kind of an anomaly there.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Steve or Mark or anybody? Mark, you have something to wrap up?
Just real brief. Again, thank you for allowing us to bring you the presentation. It is very unique that we are recommending a mid-year rate increase, but on the back of accelerating a number of projects, we think it's the most prudent way to run the fund. I would also offer that this also is in relation to item 31 and 32 tonight. Item 31 is for the mid-year rate increase. Item 32 sets the rates for January 1 of 2012, and we can adjust the level of our presentation as you see fit. Since this is taped and streamed, we can be here for a very brief overview or just simply answer questions, and can certainly let us know before 7.
I believe a brief overview would be appropriate. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Any other items the council has? All right, seeing none, we have a fiscal committee meeting that will follow this, and the clerks have asked for a 10-minute break between now and then. So let's just move to 5:35 to start the fiscal committee. Is that okay, Councilor Brown? Chair?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.